Hi, good night, everyone. Thank you for joining my Facebook Live. I do apologize for the few technical difficulties that we have, so we're starting a few minutes late. I will just give persons a couple more minutes to come on board. And just to remind you, for those of you who are on, that tonight we're going to be discussing transforming education in Anguilla, which speaks to Goal 4 of the Sustainable Development Goals. And as a reminder, on Monday we celebrated World Youth Day, and the theme for World Youth Day was transforming education. So all of this ties into that sphere. Also, before we start, just another, reminder that if persons are interested in finding out how the new electoral system will work, I am more than willing to come and speak to you or a group of your friends, co-workers, church members, whatever that grouping may be, and explain that system to you. Feel free to reach out to me on either my personal Facebook page, my Facebook page for the campaign, Gleneva Age 2020, or send me an email at glenevaage2020@gmail.com. Alright, so we will start with just looking at some stats, just a bit recap of some of the work that I've done within the past year on education, some of the work that was done by other entities, just looking at persons, their satisfaction with the education system. In July of 2018, I held a forum on education with panelists Niger Kati, who is an education specialist, teacher Lennox Vanterpool, who is an author of the book Broken Cards, which looks at Anguilla's history when it comes to comprehensive education, and he's also a founding member of Force, and Miggy Yorera, I'm sorry Miggy, who was a student who explored some of the issues that affected her when she tried to pursue a particular area of study for a particular SPA. And at that forum, one of the main things that came out was that persons felt as if though we needed to focus a bit more on the vocational aspect of education, that the technical side needed to be propped up. We tend to focus a lot on academics, and I know this week the CXC and CAPE results came out, and just want to say a huge congratulations to all those kids that did extremely well. But for those kids who may have struggled, we're gonna see the front page of the newspaper with the pictures of those that did really well. And I sometimes wonder how those who don't necessarily make the front page feel, and what does that do to their confidence levels, and are we doing enough to reinforce the message that it doesn't have to be academics. you can be a brilliant AC engineer, refrigerator engineer, whether you want to pursue marine studies, and we'll get back to the issue of marine studies in a little bit. Maybe you want to be a hairdresser, a chef. I think all of those avenues should be available to you to explore during your high school years, where you don't feel less than of a student. You know, your accomplishments should be celebrated just as well. And so that is definitely going to be the focus of what we're looking at when we speak about transforming the education system in Anguilla. I'm going to pause just for a minute, just in case anyone have any questions so far. And if there are any questions, feel yeah. So I spoke briefly of the survey that was done by Force, and I believe this would have been done sometime within the last year. They released these findings within the last year. There were 459 participants in this survey. And it was a survey of stakeholders, so that includes employers, teachers, parents, and one out of 20 stakeholders was satisfied with our secondary education system. 1 out of 20. That is a failing grade. Over 60% were dissatisfied. So you have 5% being satisfied, over 60% being dissatisfied, and the remaining 35% falling somewhere in between. Now, to me, that speaks volumes of the way that persons view our education system. To further exaggerate the situation, of the teachers surveyed, only 3% were very satisfied and 74% were dissatisfied. You know, I would like to really just stop here for a moment and talk about what that means. If 74% of our teachers surveyed are dissatisfied with the education system, these are the persons who are responsible for delivering education to our students. If 74% are dissatisfied, what does that say? We have to build the morale of teachers in our system. We have to ensure that teachers are equipped, that they have classrooms that are functioning, they have classrooms that allow for learning. It is very unfortunate that many teachers go to school and teach in classrooms that are hot and stifling. So many of us sit in our AC offices, and especially during the September, October months, we know how hot it can get. And we sit comfortably in our AC offices while teachers and students sit in classrooms that are extremely hot. And we expect teachers to work, and we expect students to learn. And I think that speaks a lot of the respect that we place on the teaching profession and the respect that we place on students overall. Back to the survey. Of 150 participants who were likely employers from the community, only 1% was very satisfied with our education system. These are employers. These are the people who, when our students leave school, our children leave school, they are saying that they are not satisfied. Only 1% are saying that they are satisfied with what we are turning out. It is clear that our education system is not meeting the needs of our job market, and we have to address this. 80% of that very same pool were dissatisfied. So 1% very satisfied and 80% dissatisfied. When we look at the parents, 50 to 60% of parents and students were dissatisfied, and 6% were very satisfied with the education system. The remaining percentage of persons were satisfied or neutral on the situation. Again, these numbers speak volumes. It tells us where we are at. It tells us that something needs to change. Tonight, I'm hoping that we can have a discussion where we can start to talk about the things that we would like to see change. One of the things with my campaign that I really want to highlight is that, especially as an independent candidate, I do not possess all of the ideas. And this is an education system that isn't just for me, and it isn't just for my child. It's an education system that is for you and your children and your grandchildren. And therefore, you should have a say in the policies that we put in place to drive our education system, to transform the education system in Anguilla. Transformational change doesn't happen by just one person. It happens when we have input from the entire community. So from all of these stakeholders, so from teachers, from students, from parents, from employers, we need input from each of these entities so that we can have the education system that our children, our country, and our future deserve. Initially, I spoke about vocational training, the need to enhance what we have, a need to shift focus somewhat. Maybe not even shift focus, because I think we're doing it well on the academic side. We need to now match our vocational aspect to what we've been able to accomplish with the academics. Additionally, we have a huge issue where I know of several persons who our reading levels within the primary school are atrocious. Yet there is very little that is put in place. Yes, there's the reading remedial and reading recovery. However, a student is allowed to move from grade to grade, even when their reading levels are below that of the grade that they're in. If we don't have the basic foundation for our children at the primary level, we end up with the issues that we have at the secondary level. A basic foundation is necessary. Our school curriculums, and this is what I hear from teachers, this is what I hear from parents. As a parent of a primary school student, I see it myself. Our school curriculums are heavily loaded with information for students who don't even grasp the basic concepts. And that is unfortunate. We have to get back to the basics. I always remember my dad when growing up, and he said the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? We have to get back to those basics. Reading, and not just being able to read, but to comprehend what you're reading, to not just be able to call words, but to know and understand the meanings of the words and the context in which those words are used. Mathematics. Even now, I see with the release of the CXC results, mathematics remains one of the lowest scoring subject areas. I think, if I recall correctly, I saw one country had 3% passes in mathematics. It didn't say which country that was, but for a country, it says that it's not an issue just locally, but regionally. We have to address the decline in our rates of passes in mathematics. And the only way to do that is to get back to basics. The basics. We cannot continue to send students to high school who do not have the basics. On the flip side of that, while we don't have a system in place to address those students who may need additional help and perhaps stay back a year or two so that they are in line with their counterparts, I also question what is in place for those students who are specially gifted on the other end of the spectrum. What do we have in place for students who are excelling? I saw and I read an article where a 9-year-old in Jamaica sat, I believe, 3 CXCs in 2018 and passed with ones. What do we have in place for those students in our public education system? Because it's very easy to see that, well, if you have an exceptionally gifted student, that you can pay for private classes and they can sit them privately. But the point of Goal 4 of the Sustainable Development Goals is quality education for all. And that means it must be equitable, not just equal. Yes, we know that every child in Anguilla goes to school for free, but is it equitable? So we're going to use that same scenario with a 9-year-old. And if, for whatever reason, that 9-year-old's parents cannot afford to send them to private tutoring, send them to private classes, what avenues exist within our public education system to identify this child and to ensure that this child is exposed and given the opportunities that are in line with his or her abilities? Those are the questions that I want you to start to ponder as we discuss this topic, as we go forward in this campaign, as I roll out the policies, as you get back to me with what it is you would like to see in our education policy, as we transform education. Because I really do want to hear from you in terms of what it is you want to see in our education system. In terms of as we move forward and we look at education, and like I say, reading being a huge aspect, we know, and we're learning more about it, that September is National Literacy Month. And I encourage everyone, and because learning does not stop at the primary level, it doesn't stop at the secondary level, it doesn't even stop at the university and tertiary level. Learning is a lifelong something, and you never stop. You should never stop learning. You should never stop yearning to expand on your knowledge, on your skill sets. And so as National Literacy Month approaches, I encourage everyone to either join a book club, go to the library, utilize our public library. They have an amazing array of books on so many topics, and the books are free. You can go and read a book, pick up a book, pick up a new subject area. Maybe it's something that you just always wanted to learn how to do. Maybe there was a topic that you just wanted to be able to explore. I implore you to do that. You know, they say children do what they see. And sometimes it's very difficult for kids who may not have had the parents who are home for whatever reasons. And this is by no means disparaging towards parents, because I think that's another area that we have to start to get into, and we'll do that during the next live when we touch on social development. But parents, take some time, even if it's 5 minutes out of your day, to read with your kids. If your kids see you reading, either to them or even to yourself, read the newspaper weekly. Those are habits, good habits, that they themselves will pick up and form. So if it's an afternoon after school or Saturday morning, you can take your kids to the library. There are several resources. I know nowadays most kids have e-readers and tablets and phones. I personally don't leave anywhere without my Kindle app on either my phone or my tablet. But there are also free resources if you don't have a Kindle app. There are free resources where you can find links to free books, and I will share some of those links on my page so that you can have access to them and your kids can find meaningful ways to read a book. For me, there's nothing like flipping the pages of a physical book, but in this day of technology, there is absolutely no reason why you don't read a book. We will pause for a few moments and we will be right back. During this time, feel free to send any questions, any comments, and when we return, I hope to have a very vibrant discussion on this topic. Oh, I see that there's a question coming in. I will address this question in 2 minutes. So we'll take a 2-minute break and we will be back. Okay, so I have a question from Pam. Good evening, Pam. Thank you for joining us. Where would I begin in transforming education? Like I said, transforming education begins with all stakeholders. It's not just one person. And so as we go through this process, I do intend to speak with stakeholders and bring stakeholders together and have this conversation. Again, we started with this last year when we had that education forum, and so I hope to continue with that, take the findings of that, whether we collaborate with entities that have done work and we listen and we implement those changes that persons are asking for, because the information is out there. It's not that it's not there. We just need persons who are committed to improving the education system. We need persons who are willing to admit that these statistics that I spoke of, that they're real. We have to admit that there is an issue and move forward. And I think that is where we start. We can no longer sit back and say that there is not an issue. It must become, education must become a priority. Not just a priority for a few, it must be a priority of our elected officials. We have to start to put resources in place so that we don't have teachers, like I speak about, we don't have teachers who are sitting in hot classrooms and teaching in hot classrooms. We don't have students who are learning in conditions that aren't conducive to learning. And so when we start to look in, it is sometimes very difficult when you start to look at budgets and you say, well, education does not bring in money. Well, education does not bring in money. You have no country, you have no future if you do not develop the human resources of your country. And so every Anguillian child and adult should have access to the educational needs that they require. So that's how we will start transforming the education system, Pam. We will start by listening and making it a priority, diverting resources to that area. I can think of it in the past year. I can think of several areas in which we saw funding being placed in areas that benefited no one but the ministers themselves. No one can explain to me where certain funding went and how that benefited the people and the children of this country. Regine, hi, thank you for your question. How do I propose that we improve the vocational training within the education system? Last year when we did the forum, I believe he is the coordinator for the TVET section, had just been put in place. And so for me, it would be interesting to see in that past year what improvements have been made. I know he spoke about the BTEC certification. I'd like to see more of that being implemented in our secondary school, secondary level education, whether it means streaming kids from an earlier form into those areas where they still get the basic foundation, educational foundation that they need, but that we are able to identify their paths a little bit earlier on. I went to school with some very talented chefs, and for a very long time I saw a few of them massively frustrated. They were expected to sit in classes and not hone in on those skills that they knew lie deep inside of them, and they sat in classes very frustrated and being told that they were dunce, being told that they weren't good enough. Why can't you be like student A and B who are in all band 1s, you who are in band 4s? Yet these students held within them the potential to be great, and I see so many of them flourishing as world-class chefs and in different areas now, and I think we owe it to those students to tap into that potential from much earlier on. how do we improve the mathematics scores? We have to again go back to the basics from primary school level and ensure that students are grasping the basics before they move on. We are such a standardized test driven system. We exist in a system of having to complete a curriculum so that kids can do an exam, but we don't focus on the kids just being able to complete the basics. If you don't have the basics at grade 1 and grade 2, there's no way you're going to get the basics at grade 6. And if you didn't get it at grade 1 and 2 and you skipped over it in grade 6, when you get to first and second form and then you realize that there's a problem, by the time you get into fifth form, then that is where you start to see those low scores. So a greater focus on the basics in the lower grades of primary school. You know, CXC has deepened its roots in our education system, as even in primary school, we have kids in grade 4, 5, and 6 preparing for the, and excuse me because it just slipped my head, but there is an exam that is administered from the CXC group of exams, the CPEA exams, and it consists of exams and portfolios that kids are expected to produce. And again, I ask, we spend so much time, and the teachers, there's only so many hours in a day, and when we are expected to produce these portfolios for CPEA, how much time do we have to prepare for the basics? We have to get back to the basics, and that is how we improve not just our mathematics scores, but that is how we improve our reading comprehension levels, our reading levels, spending more time on the basics at the primary level. My thoughts on the vocational school instead of combined. That is something that I think we should be open to. It is something that would require further discussion with, again, all stakeholders. It is far from me to sit here and say, this is what we should do without consulting those persons who are directly impacted by it. I think it is something that can be very beneficial. I think it's an avenue that we can look at. And even if it is housed within the one compound, I don't see why it needs to be separated in terms of the compound. The separation really should come from a streaming process where students are streamed into each the different sections from earlier on. One of the things that it may mean is looking at the options and the way that the options are set out. For when students are picking options, I think they pick their options at the end of third form. Sometimes the options are very, in terms of the way that the options are set out, it's very restrictive. And so maybe that is something that we can take a look at in the restructuring of how the options are chosen and presented to students. So I know that this forum may not necessarily allow for the interaction that would allow for that kind of discussion, but feel free to not just ask questions, but to also pose any feedback, any ideas, anything that you would like to see to improve our education system, feel free to include those in your comments. And I will, if you post those comments, I will address them at another time. I thank you all for joining in on this live. I do always enjoy being able to interact with persons in this medium, and I look forward to interacting with you face to face. And I would like to announce that I believe it will be at the end of September. We will host a town hall where we can address this and other topics. It will be the first of many town halls, and this being our second live discussion, the feedback from the first was very overwhelmingly positive, and so we're going to continue to have these on a monthly basis. Stay tuned to the page as we will announce the dates for more Facebook Live sessions and for the face-to-face town hall meetings. I will let you know the dates, the time, the place, once we have all of that in place. So thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to hearing from you and speaking with you more as we continue this journey. Remember, it's Gleneva Hodge 2020, and we are putting our people first.